So very soon, hopefully, the government's House of Lord Reform Bill, or at least its Hereditary Peer Bill, as it's more coming to be known, should be passing hopefully sometime this week. And when it does, finally, the last of the hereditary lords will leave Westminster for good. And that will mean officially that at that point you cannot be just born into a position and have a right to basically govern this country without the consent of the people. I think we can all agree that is very good. And for those of you who have watched my channel for long enough, you know my views on the House of Lords by now, or at least you should know my views on the House of Lords. I said, look, the House of Lords, as far as I have said many, many times, should be reformed. It should become a house of regional representation. Split it all up, UK, up into its different regions. Everywhere gets, same amount of, I don't know, people. Maybe you say, I don't know, each region gets 3. That way it's fair. And then you do it by proportional representation. Most votes gets, depending on that seat. So I don't know, maybe do it somewhere and you get, I don't know, 2 Conservatives and 1 Lib Dem, or 2 Labour and a Lib Dem, or SNP, Lib Dem and Conservative. Again, better people have thought out ideas of how a elected House of Lords should work than me, but I would love to see it go in that direction, to have that elected House of Lords. And I've said many, many times, I think that should really, really be ultimately, even though I want to see, of course, our current voting system for MPs changed, I still think the bigger and best target would be the House of Lords, because there is so much hatred against the current House of Lords. And I think if it was changed, I think it would really radically, fundamentally change our system for the better. So I'm going to have a look at something interesting today on the BBC, as they actually interview some of these hereditary peers on what could very well be their very last year in a way in Parliament, because once this bill passes, I think they then get like a year left on their term. So by the end of this year, that will be it. And I think that is good. I think there is even more to go on this. I think we should be going for full-on reform, turn it into a proper elected body. And hey, if these peers are good enough and they want to, are as good as they claim, well, hey, they should be able to stand for an election, right? And, do it themselves. But then you've got, of course, the people who get, peerages for life, who get, Michael Gove just been made a hereditary peer by Rishi Sunak. He's now in the House of Lords for the rest of his life. There is so much stuff. Sometimes I think this is something we should absolutely focus on and absolutely get to change. I think it is really, I've got my problems, of course, with Westminster and how that's all sorted out, but my word, House of Lords, needs to be changed completely. So before we go on into this, please do have a look at the Patreon page. There's the Buy Me Coffee link down below. There's the Pony Club as well, and of course there's the YouTube thank you button too. So as always, thank you very much for all those people who help support the channel. Like I say, you can always click the like and share button as well to help out the channel too. So let's crack on then into this. Coming from the BBC, hereditary lords now speak out on the prospect of leaving Parliament. So, imprisoned back in the Tower of London in 1538, waiting to be executed, Henry Courtenay, the Earl of Devon, wrote on his cell walls, which would become now his famous family motto, "Where have I fallen? What have I done?" Nearly 500 years later, and now another Earl of Devon is once again contemplating getting the chop. Charlie Courtenay, the 19th or 38th Earl of Devon, depending on how you count it, is one of the 87 remaining hereditary peers who will be kicked out of the House of Lords this year if the government's House of Lords Hereditary Peer Bill passes. He's fairly, of course, relaxed about his impending departure. Henry Courtenay's beheading was, of course, one of his 4 family who have now suffered or so for the current Earl of Devon's executions. As he's put it, of course, nothing new. He said, "For hoods are hereditaries, that's what happens." For hundreds of years, hereditary peers have had the right to make and debate laws in Parliament, a right that they inherited from their fathers and then passed on to their sons. Again, something quite sexist about it, because until very, very recently, if you had a girl and that was like your only heir, it wouldn't be passed on to them. Wouldn't be passed on to them. Of course, in 1999, Tony Blair then described the presence of the House of Lords as now an anachronism and got rid of more than 600 of them, which again was a very good achievement. But then, following what was supposed to be a temporary compromise, 92 were, of course, then saved. 25 years on, the new Labour government has now come into power and it's hoping now to get rid of the ones who remain. The BBC has now spoken to 4 of those peers who are now preparing to pack up their parliamentary bags. So, Charlie Courtenay is obviously very happy to talk about his family's long history, but growing up, he did feel very uncomfortable about his privileged background. It is obviously very awkward and embarrassing now on a personal front. Particularly, of course, it doesn't help if you live in a castle. You feel a bit like the odd one out. I moved away from England for over 10 years and lived in America, where it suddenly became a lot easier. By moving to America, the response was, "Gee, that's really interesting. Tell me more." I learned to talk about it with at least a bit more confidence. His distant ancestor, Baldwin de Reeves, was of course given the title in 1142 as a reward for backing Empress Matilda's right to the throne. He inherited it now following his father's death in 2015 and began to, of course, think more deeply about what it actually meant to be an earl. His father had been kicked out of the House of Lords back in 1999, but his son was able to return via the by-election process, by which hereditaries who have died can be replaced by others from that very same political grouping. He said that he remembers thinking, "Here's a nice opportunity to provide Devon a voice in Westminster," but which exactly was the job that Baldwin was given over 900 years ago. Again, you weren't really sort of voted in. It was a very small group of people about that. Kind of odd. Anyway, the Earl of Devon is what he calls a, quote, unashamed proponent of hereditary peers. He said, "I am the one person who defends the indefensible," he jokes. He argues at the time of concern about the rapid consumption of our natural world, hereditaries offer now a very long-term, multi-generational view, and are less likely now to be focused on short-term political gains. What about the long-term political gains, which, of course, remaining months, he's at least hoping to, if not change the law, then get some support for his amendment to remove what he calls the patriarchal misogynistic rules that, of course, bar women from inheriting most titles. "I find it frankly ludicrous, embarrassingly wrong that my sister and my aunt and even my daughter cannot inherit the title." Again, it's still pretty much the same. You need to, maybe do something about that. Whether, of course, this amendment, of course, is accepted isn't all but certain, but that is that children will, of course, get a chance to sit in the House of Lords based on these titles alone. The fact that the Earl is more than, of course, resigned to do. It's a big time, of course, for the Courtenay family for around since 1100. Ever since then, it has been a kind of sign of the gentle winding down of the glories. This is just another step now on the route to ignominy. I will, of course, not miss commuting the 672 miles there and back every week, says Lord Thurso, the Liberal Democrat peer. He lived in Thurso town, which is, of course, northeast of Scotland. It's about as far as the Lord you can get without being on a boat. There's no problem, of course, with hereditary peers getting the boot. He said the idea we've had now for some unique quality is, of course, laughable, he says. But he doubts, of course, it will make much of a difference. This is just another sticking plaster over something that really needs to be dealt with. Again, I agree on this one. He says the Lords have good debates and scrutinize government plans extremely well. But does it actually get us anywhere? It doesn't. To have influence with the government, the Lords, of course, needs legitimacy, he says, which again is very true. A house full of largely retired MPs put out now to grass for at least 30 or 40 years of people who, like me, who inherited it because their grandfather was, of course, cabinet secretary, or to put it another way, put together a second chamber. Back in 2012, he worked on a very much doomed plan, which would have seen the Lords made up of a combination of elected and appointed peers. And again, there have been moves. It is worth pointing out that there have been moves actually within the House of Lords of guys like this who actually recognize, oh, well, hold on a second, we aren't the most democratic, organization, in the UK. Maybe we should do something about it. So this is the thing where you get into this and you really start looking to this. You will actually notice some of the biggest criticism of the House of Lords comes from Lords themselves. But it is something that it really needs to be done. This is yet another sticking plaster over the problem that is the House of Lords. It needs to be really, really dealt with on that one. He says there is not a cat and hell's chance the government of making any further changes once the current bill is, of course, passed. He wants to see ministers use legislation to make other changes, including now a 20-year term limit for the new peers and a restriction on the size of the House, which again, I think would be good, but again, something needs to be, I think, got away with. If you got those two, well, we can obviously wait another 100 years or so for democracy, he sighs. Lord Howe inherited his title now from his son's second cousin back in 1984, along with Penn House, a stately Buckinghamshire home. His wife and I in life lived in a very small terraced house near in London. She was a teacher, I was working in a bank, and all of a sudden I had a call to say I inherited a title. It was a very much shock to the system, particularly when you arrived in a very dark January evening, the front door creaks open, and there's the butler saying, "Welcome to your home, your lordship." Didn't feel like home at all. The heating bill costs more than his annual salary, he remembered. But just a few years after becoming a peer, he was made a minister by the then Conservative Prime Minister John Major. Must have been scraping the barrel, he says. He's been on the front bench of his party ever since, different various roles, but nearly 40 years on, his enthusiasm for the Lords has not diminished. He said, "I love the place. I found it very fulfilling. And just occasionally, you feel that you've done that little bit of good." And again, I'm not, disagreeing. Like I say, his view on that, if he feels like, he did some good, great. But why couldn't he have been elected to do so? You could have had someone elected to do that on that. So, Lord Hacking is obviously a very rare thing. A Labour hereditary peer. There are, of course, only 4 of its kind. In fact, he partly explains the government's enthusiasm to get rid of the hereditaries. He got the title back in 1971, but never expected to stay so long. He assumed that the hereditary peers would soon be removed and decided that once he was kicked out, he could then run to be an MP. It didn't work out quite like that, he says, a bad political misjudgment. I remained in the House of Lords until 1999, when I was one of the 62, and that was a bit late then, I think, to start thinking about getting into the House of Commons. He backs his current party's position on the hereditary peers, but of course not without regret. I wouldn't say that I'm happy to get rid of them, but I'm sad that I think that what will, of course, happen. It is the very best of the hereditary peers that will then, of course, be invited to have a life peerage. I'm sure there will be a compromise. We always compromise out of situations in England. Again, I just think we should just get rid of it. There's always this, we could do something about our House of Lords, and the thing is, I think we really could. I generally think we really could if the public stood up and said, we want rid of the House of Lords. But there has never, ever, ever been like a serious push by the public to get rid of the House of Lords. You see the movement to get, change, the voting situation at Westminster. Great. Love that that's there. Where's the one for the House of Lords? Says it all, really, doesn't it? But I think really getting rid of the House of Lords, making the public care about why we should reform it, make it a house of, like, regional representation would make it a heck of a lot fairer. I think for the government, give it a big boost in, like, legitimacy. I think people will then care more about it. I think it would be very good for our democracy to have something like that. But of course, now, we'll see what happens. Of course, with this bill, will it pass? Will it be a compromise? I hope not. Um, but it will be good, at least a step to finally get rid of it. But we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. So, of course, on that one, let me know what you think about this. But of course, as always, hit the like, hit the share button on your way out, and of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.